What's up guys, Hades here. Today I have a really cool video. IB League playoffs are coming up. They're going to be here next week. I want you to be as prepared as possible, so I'm going to go through a fundamentals, okay? We're first going to talk about player organization, and that's going to have 3 subcategories. We're then going to talk a little bit about builds, variations and counters, and finally coordination and leadership. Now, these 3 core elements are what lead to leading IB wins. If you haven't been here in this channel, my name's Hades. I'm a 3-time back-to-back champion. I have won many games, and I have led the meta to what it is today. And I'm going to kind of show you all the pieces to an IB match and what it means. Now, first, we need to talk about who can make it on the battlefield. When you're looking at a replay, it is imperative that you have the max number of players on the field ready to go, right? Do you have 40 or not, right? In the early stages, 40 is very difficult to get, and these matches don't matter that much. But in the playoffs, when you only get 30, then less the mass is, the more valuable each player is. And the harder the teams are, the more important. So when you're making that roster and you're setting your times, make sure you're going to get optimal participation. I cannot stress how important it is to get participation. A good leader who does correct mails and have people who follow through, that is the first and most important thing. If you cannot field enough players, that's going to be a problem. Now, if you have a good problem where you have 35 to 40 players who you can play, then you have to narrow down who is better, right? And that's where you need to start watching replays. Who's scoring well, who's defending well, who's joining rallies quickly, right? These things all start to matter so much more. Then when we're talking about organization, you need to have your players organize that towers correctly, right? When we talk about the start of a game, is your initial relocation well organized? Do you have someone making markers before the game? Who goes where? Are they done in the first 5 minutes while you're loading in? Are players lining up really nicely, or are they stepping on each other, right? These are all massive discrepancies in a win versus a loss, and I'll tell you right now, this part of the game, organizing players, having everyone go to the correct tower in the right spot, and being well organized leads to winning IB. Just these fundamentals, this first tip is the biggest tip for any new leaders out there trying to win. If you can lock these down, get good players, make a system that works for you, this is what's going to start the winning process. And I'll tell you right now, you are going to make or break big games off these beginning reloads. You can see here, in a matchup we had last week, our opponents destroyed themselves. They essentially blocked 3 players on their own, guaranteed, and they almost had a double block on themselves here. We didn't even have to have good reloads, and they would have just had less players, period. And if you have less players at a single tower, that's not good for winning. Now, we're going to break it down even further when it comes to organization. Here's a basic breakdown of what it looks like when you're sending 30 players on the battlefield. This is the most flexible number, as your home base is the most safe. This can vary between 1 and 5. I've seen a lot of it. I like to stick with between 2 to 4. I think this is the magic number. You kind of have to scout your opponents. Sometimes they like to go to the altar and then to your home. If they like to do something like that, you're going to want to hover it closer to 4. If they don't do something like that, you can skimp and go to 2 or less, but you have to be mindful that the less you go, the less safe it is. But the more people you send, the less they have in other spots, and I'll explain that in a bit. So here's a basic setup. 8 to the top, 8 to the bottom, 10 to the mid. This is very stock standard. If you just use this formula, you're going to probably be more successful than you've been in the past. Now, this is not the only way to play. There's a lot of variations, and I'll explain. There's something called overloading. Okay, basically overloading looks at something like this. They go really soft at home with like a 2. They go something like 15 to 18 in the middle, and they have something like 12 to 15 at the top, and they either put 0 or a few at a side. This is a very serious strategy. It's been very successful, and the reason is if you control 1, 2, 3 points on the map and you control them the whole game, you win. It's that simple. If you own 3, you own more than them, you win. It could be any 3. It doesn't have to be those 3. It could be these 3, right? So you could shift these numbers to the bottom, give a middle, and do the exact same thing, right? So there's no difference in this type of play. It all ends up being your choice. Now you can keep it a little more simple, and you could do something more like 9, 9, 9, and have 3 at home. Something like this is very standard. Or, you know, you can subtract 1 from here and put it here and go from 9 to 8, and then here you go from 9 to 10, right? There could be reasons for this. Why? Well, maybe most of your players spawn on the top half of the board, meaning you want to go more towards the top side. Or maybe you can see in this game they had no one on the edge, which means they wouldn't want to go as many towards the bottom. These are all decisions that have to be made within the very first few moments of a game or in a pre-game strategy, depending on your opponent. Next, we need to talk about builds. If you watched my last video, you know that there are going to be meta builds. Now, I have not changed the builds. I will not be changing the integrity of secret builds from different seasons and stuff. And it's up to you to find what is best in this meta. However, you need to experiment, okay? And you need to also have meta things that counter each other. So the current meta was full fire, water that countered, and con that countered water, right? We talked about this in the last video. Now, keep in mind, we have a bunch of new immortals available. And some of these warp the meta. And I'll give you a few examples. First of all, there's 2 new water immortals. Merlin with Dido, and Ragnar is very, very strong. Seondeok with Cyrus is very, very strong. These are 2 very strong teams that I highly recommend and have been very successful. Don't forget that Matilda's added, Hammurabi's added, Atlanta, and Arash, as well as Mehmed. And I think that's all of them. But go and do experiments. Make sure you're blending in the new water immortals because they are upgrades. Make sure you're adding Seondeok. She is absolutely one of the best characters in the game. However, metas change as the games evolve. Seondeok is no longer the powerhouse she used to be. Her crits have changed slightly based on coercive. And what I mean by that is her ability to do bonus damage through coercive and get it quicker is no longer available due to the nerfs to coercive, specifically on her. So keep those in mind. I will not be giving out any builds. I believe in keeping the integrity of the game, but I want to keep everyone's thoughts on these. They are more powerful. They are slightly better. There's a reason you're able to use them. The second piece is there's new unlocks in the store. Now we have access to skills like No Escape and Coercive Power, some of the best skills in the game. No wonder they're at the top, right? Don't forget about things like Weakening Curse, Executioner, Abundant Spirit, Energy Shield. These things all become extremely meta, and you need to add them to your teams or you're going to fall behind. You also get 150 bonus points. I think we'll probably get another 50 during this bye week, so make sure you're adding those points. Make sure you're being a good leader and making sure all the teammates you have are adding to these points. Now, the final thing is coordination and leadership. Coordination and leadership all comes down to a few commanders. What I like to have is one commander who is in a voice call at the top, one in the middle, and one on the bottom. And if they can't do voice, at least they're tagging, like if there's a castle here, they put a little tag on it, like that's the priority. Or there's another castle here that's low and they tag that, that's the priority. Or they're calling out that there's a rotation from here to here, right? These are things that matter, that are in-game leadership and coordination pieces, right? Or it's just quick rallies. Are people coordinated? Can you build that synergy with people? Sometimes this takes years. Sometimes players are so good they can do it with anyone instantly. But these are really important aspects to the game that need to be addressed. They're in-game decision making. What happens when you're in a situation where you're losing, right? Let's just say the drawings are red. You own 2 and the opponent owns 3. What do, right? Are you gonna panic? Are you just gonna do nothing and lose? Are you gonna make a TP play into their weak spot? Are you going to relocate into their middle and take the middle? Does it make sense? Are people on the same page? Are the relocations right? These are all things that leadership needs to be part of, and they make a huge decision in the impact of a game. I cannot tell you how many times I have called something out before it happened and made sure my players were ready to make it happen, and then they executed, right? It all starts with the leader. The leader then follows in to all the players who are playing. It is a war game. It's a coordination game, and it takes time and practice. I implore you to look at your own replays. Look at your losses specifically, or your close wins or close losses. Where did you fail? Who failed? Why did they fail? Was it a leadership issue? Was it a planning issue? Was it a player issue? Was it a disconnect issue, right? Find those gaps in your knowledge. Make sure you are implementing everything to your capability. You're following the fundamentals of the game, these 3 steps, right? First, organize your players. Make sure you're fielding the max amount you can. Second, make sure everyone's on the same page. Everyone has builds, variations, counters, and they're ready to go. And third, and most importantly, make sure everyone has what they need to succeed within the game. All right? If you guys like these kind of videos, make sure you leave a comment, and I will see you in the next one.